Okay, so I'm getting ready to start my first part of my real estate test review. So we're going to have real property versus personal property. Real property is land improvements attached to land, benefits, rights, and ownership interests to go with land. Um, One of the major ways to remember real property is that it's immovable. Um, the sale of real property is conveyed through a contract, a title, lease, or most importantly, a deed. Personal property is a right or interest in something of a temporary or movable nature. Most importantly, a movable nature. It includes anything that's not classed as real property. So, personal property is something that can be moved, that can be taken to or away. Personal property is also called chattel. Ownership is transferred through bill of sale. And appurtenance. An appurtenance is the rights, the privileges, or improvements that belong to or pass with land. Improvements. Improvements are additions to land, such as buildings and landscaping. A fixture. This is important. And a fixture is an item that was once personal property but is attached in a way that has become real property. Now, once you attach the fixture to like a building, that's called annexation. So annexation is the process of attaching a fixture. So, for example, the ceiling fan, if it's once you attach it, the process of attaching it is annexation. Severance. Severance is the process of detaching or taking real property and making it personal property, and that's called severance. So if I take the ceiling fan down, once I take it down, I'm severing that from the house and it becomes personal property again. A trade fixture. A trade fixture is a fixture that's installed by a tenant to carry out a business. So an example would be if I turn this into a dance studio and then I put up something that says Whitby's Dance Studio, that would be a trade fixture. Implements are crops cultivated annually. Even though they are attached to the ground, they are considered to be personal property of the farmer or the person that cultivates them. So that gives you an implement. An implement means that you have the right to like dig up the plants. You have a right to dig up the plants. You have a right to like sell them. If you let's say you have a lease, once the lease is over, you can actually go and dig those plants up because they are your personal property. All right, so characteristics of real property. There are four characteristics of real property, and we can remember them as sin or nis. Let's go with sin. So scarcity, indestructibility, immobility, and non-homogeneity. Excuse me. The economic characteristics of land is scarcity, modification, fixity, and situs. Public and private land use controls. This is a different section, so we're going to public and private land use controls. Public controls is pretty much government rights and government say in how we use and what we do with our land. All right, the first one is police power. Police power is the power given to a municipality to regulate and control the character and use of property for the health, safety, and general welfare. When it says municipality, that's pretty much like the city, state government, more so the city government. Zoning is the most common police power. Most police powers are local zoning laws. So we have non-conforming use. That's when a zoning change happened. A property that was built before the laws were passed allows it to pretty much stay as is, and that means that it's grandfathered in. So that means that let's say I have a barbecue place, smoke shop, and then they pass a law that says that my properties could only produce so much smoke if it's built. If my shop was there before they passed the law, more than likely I would be grandfathered in and I would have a non-conforming use. A variance is basically it allows your property to violate the zoning rule, and a person may request a variance. A variance can also be requested prior to construction. So you would have to, I believe you would have to go to like the local government and get like a variance. Also, a variance goes with the property when it's sold. You have buffer zones, and a buffer zone is an area separating land use from another, such as a residential form. So basically, you will have a buffer zone would be between like commercial use of land and then residential use of land. It may be like bushes, parking lot, or even townhomes or something like that. Eminent domain is the right of the government to take private property for use through the action of condemnation. Government must compensate property owners when using eminent domain. Inverse condemnation is when an individual forces the government to buy his or her property. So an example of this, let's say the government is building like a highway close to a property. It's too much noise, so the individual will take action that forces the government to buy the property and give them fair compensation. Escheat is when property reverts to the state when someone dies without a will and no heirs or kindred to take the property. So it goes back to the state. That's escheat. Private controls and restriction on the use of land. You have deed restrictions or limitations on how and what owners can do with property. Deed restrictions are imposed to control land use, development, and methods and materials for construction. Style and appurtenance requirements can also be enforced. You have CC&R, HOAs, and POAs. Injunctions are court-enforced restrictions, and it can result in the loss of property. Hate when that comes up. Encumbrance. An encumbrance is a limitation placed on land or a limit on the owner's property rights that may or may not be a cloud on the title. Reservation easements and encroachments are examples of encumbrances. Taxation. Property taxes are the highest priority lien on real property. Taxes are based on the value of the property. Unpaid taxes may place a lien on the property. And so basically, a lien is kind of like a cloud on the title. So that means that if you owe taxes, even if the government confiscates the land when the next person buys the property, they have to pay off that lien. Escheat. That means that the property reverts back to the state government when someone dies and has no will. I think we did that already. Injunctions are when the courts step in to enforce deed restrictions. Reservation. Imposed by a grantor which holds title to a part of land described in a deed. Encroachments. An encroachment is when a structure or improvement to land overlaps or trespasses onto another person's property. That must be disclosed. So, for example, a few years ago, I was staying in a property. The guy wanted to extend his driveway. He actually kind of built his driveway on the property that we were on. That created an encroachment. An easement. An easement allows limited use or enjoyment of someone else's land. The easement can be expressed, written, or verbal, or implied just by their actions or evidence. Easement by condemnation. The government will take an easement in condemnation for itself or for like utility or railroad companies. So now we're going into dominant and subservient estates. A dominant estate is an estate that's landlocked, and then so a dominant, like let's say that you have a property, one person cannot get off of their property without driving through someone else's property. You have that road that's on the other person's property. That road coming from someone else's property is the dominant estate. And so it allows that person to just, that enjoyment of someone else's land to like exit and enter their property. Easement and gross. An easement that belongs to a person or a corporation. An example is a utility easement. No matter who owns the land, if they build power lines on the property, the power lines belong to the utility company. That's an easement and gross. You have a license. A license is permission to do a particular act upon the land or property of another. A license is similar to an easement, but much more limited duration or time. It is not a right to land. It is often given verbally and easily revoked. Adverse possession. Adverse possession is also called squatter rights. It's when someone lives on a land illegally for so long that they have a right to the land. In Texas, it's normally for 10 years. In other states, it can be 20 years. Occupancy must be hostile, visible or open, actual or notorious, continuous, and distinct for the statutory period. So basically, if someone is living on your land and you don't do anything about it for a certain amount of time, according to the laws in that state, that person could take your land. Lis pendens. Lis pendens is a recorded notice filed against a specific property, meaning that some form of lawsuit has been filed but not yet resolved in court. This may become an issue for a new owner if it is not resolved prior to the closing. Okay, so now we're going into our last part, which is the 4 legal descriptions. You have number 1, metes and bounds. Metes and bounds description uses terminal points and angle and always has a point of beginning. It is the oldest and most common method of survey. What you're going to see is you're going to see that point of beginning is going to be a monument. It's a permanent survey marker. And they are often the starting point for a metes and bound description. The next one, you have lot, blot, and subdivision description. Lot LBS descriptions are derived from a recorded map called the plat. This is the most common description used in residential listing agreements. And then you have the rectangular survey system, also known as the government survey system. It takes into consideration baselines and meridian townships and sections. Townships and sections are located in range, so you'll see like a little system with squares here. One square is a township, and it contains 36 sections. Each section contains 640 acres, which is 1 square mile. Each acre contains 43,560 square feet. 1 mile equals 5,280. So in order to remember one mile equals 5,280 feet, we say doing a 52 and an 80. Doing a 52 and an 80. And that's the end.